Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are today. Welcome to the Digital Leaders Show, where we talk key issues and news at the intersection of business and technology in hopes of making you a better digital leader. We're live every Wednesday at noon Eastern, 9 Pacific on LinkedIn and YouTube. The audio recording is available the following week wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Dan Goodstein. I head up IRPA AI. We're a professional association, media, and peer-to-peer research network providing education, networking, and advice to over 130,000 members globally, all around automation, enterprise AI, and digital transformation. Today, we're discussing how foreign adversaries stole your IT job, plus headlines for digital leaders from the world of enterprise technology. Thanks to our sponsor, Oracle NetSuite, their cloud ERP helps provide real-time visibility into operational and financial performance. Podcast followers and IRPA members can get preferred pricing up to 45% off NetSuite. IRPAai.com/NetSuite for more information. I'm joined today once again by Chris Surdak. He's my new partner in crime on the Digital Leaders Show, amongst other things here. He's a senior analyst for IRPA AI and was formerly White House Chief Transformation Office Advisor, partner for digital transformation at Gartner, and automation AI practice lead at EY. How are you, Chris?
I am doing well. We made it through both the 4th of July, or May the 4th be with you, and Cinco de Mayo unscathed. So that's good.
Can I tell you a little thing? I had a rough day the other day, long day, and I turned on something. I don't even remember what I was watching, but I opened up Disney Plus, and they had the graphic of the lightsaber carving the Disney logo. I thought that was kind of cool. I forgot it was May the 4th, but May the 4th be with you, everyone. Looking at your reading off your bio as we do, Chris, every week, I almost forget that you come from this consulting world, and one of the headlines I had for today was another round of layoffs from a Big Four consulting firm, PwC. It's second one in less than a year. They laid off almost 2,000 workers back in September, which was their first major workforce reduction in over 10 years. And they just announced today another 1,500 jobs. It's going to end up being like 5% of their workforce, which, I guess is not a huge number, but, it does kind of raise some questions about, is this just, the restructuring stuff again? Is this post-COVID hiring stuff, or is this AI starting to really affect the labor force?
Well, as an alumnus of two of the Big Four, or Big Five, whatever the number you want to count, ironically, I was having this conversation with a fellow alumni yesterday. We were talking about exactly this, and whether or not the classic model of not only the Big Four consultancy, but also like strategic consultancies, McKinsey and so forth, is that sustainable with the generative AI headwind that we're facing? And as he and I spoke, there's an acknowledgement too that COVID was extraordinary, and our response to COVID was extraordinarily disruptive. The change in interest rates, so we've lived in an era for about 16, 17 years of virtually free money, and that's going away. So all of a sudden, when you look at half of the Fortune 500 companies are effectively zombie companies, they are cash flow negative. So they've been basically funding their operations with cheap loans for over a decade. And then digital transformation itself, the way that we operate as businesses and so forth. A lot of people say, well, we did transformation 8 or 9 years ago. You didn't really. You had a program and you paid to say you were doing digital transformation, but did you really transform? And I think what we're seeing now is the actual manifestation of digital transformation into organizations. And so to me, there's an old saying in the Middle East, don't let a camel get its nose under the tent, because if the nose gets under, the rest of the camel follows. So to me, this is sort of the camel's nose for this. The traditional large scale consultancies it's an unsustainable model, and it's starting to reveal itself as such.
Yeah, the other headline for today, Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI, announced earlier this week that it's going to remain a nonprofit that's going to control ChatGPT, and has so since 2019. The for-profit version of the business, or part of the business, is going to be converted over to a public benefit corporation. So kind of a U-turn on his plan to make the company a more traditional for-profit company. And Why do you think is this a result of all of the headwinds from the Elon Musks of the world and others, or is this just something changed in the business strategy?
I think there's multiple factors. I think Sam, I mean, now that he has his collection of Koenigseggs and Paganis and Lamborghinis, he doesn't really need to be profitable anymore. And his Gulfstream. So that's one factor. I think another factor is it was illegal to begin with, and it's just taken this long for the litigation to catch up with the fact that he invented a new corporate entity out of thin air. Third factor is that's this round of litigation, and wait for more to come. Right, there's more filings to come with this much money at stake, and I think it's going to be interesting to see the response of. I mean, how much investment have they gotten? $50-ish billion or something. I think there's probably a fair number of people that were looking for a profitable business, and maybe somewhat annoyed at the fact that their $50 billion just lost its whatever expected returns. So yeah, this is chapter 2 of the AI Dune novel series, because there's a lot more to come.
Yeah, they were valued based on the recent funding round led by SoftBank, valued at $300 billion last check. And they've actually just made a large acquisition of their own, their biggest acquisition so far, $3 billion acquisition of a company called Windsurf, an AI assisted coding tool. According to Bloomberg, it hasn't closed yet, the deal, but if it comes to fruition, it's going to really amp up the race between them and Anthropic, which already has AI tools for programmers, per our recent will AI take your programming job show.
So it didn't do super well, but if you saw the sequel to Blade Runner, it was Blade Runner 2049 or whatever, at the start, the guy has a bug farm, and that produces the protein that everyone eats in 2049. So the idea of using AI for coding, to me, that's bug farming. You're just asking for there to be errors in the code, and welcome to the rework economy. As I said with you earlier today, the vast majority of labor, human labor in the future, appears to be fixing screw ups that automation coughs out for mere pennies and in mere seconds. This is a terrible idea stacked upon. It's a totem pole of really bad business ideas. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. Vibe coding is just asking for catastrophic problems.
Yeah. So Apple and Anthropic have joined forces around this kind of vibe coding platform, is what they're calling it, designed to write, edit, and test code using Gen AI. Interesting though, Apple hasn't necessarily committed completely to Anthropic. Previously they've been pushing OpenAI partnerships and even a Google partnership, but they're clearly serious about this AI development tool thing.
It takes me back to the question I've been asking for the better part of about 14 years: is you have to ask yourself, what is the product here? What is being sold, and what is being collected? What's the raw material that's being used to produce a finished good? And one could argue that the raw material here is you asking the software to write some code for it, and so we're just learning from you. If you're a terrible coder, we'll figure that out eventually. If you're a superb coder, we're learning from you. So keep in mind, all of your interactions with these systems are constantly collected, aggregated, analyzed, etc. We've been doing that sort of data collection for nearly two decades. And so if you're vibing with the AI, what you're doing is you're interacting with a data collection tool that's trying to learn from you. So you might get some decent code out of it, but the probabilities aren't in your favor. And if you're pretty good at this stuff, they're very happy to learn everything that you have to offer them.
Yeah, along the same lines, not programming related, but Meta just announced its standalone AI app for, I think it's just for Apple for now, but another AI assistant. And my first reaction was, we don't need another AI assistant. But the idea behind this one is more of a social play where, we've talked about kind of prompt engineering. This is like social media prompting where you kind of collaborate with others to, I guess share prompts, create prompts together, piece things together. I guess you made me think of it when you're talking coding, right? Almost the way coders would, take, previously used lines of code and templates and things into prompts, really create this kind of social fueled prompt engineering. So maybe it's different for that reason, but interesting.
This falls under what I call attentionomics, right? How do I monetize eyeball minutes? And so if I can give you something, I mean, you're burned out on just seeing what all your friends are up to. So let's collaborate with something that makes entertaining memes like you have on the screen here. And all of a sudden you're jacking up my eyeball minutes again, which is how Facebook pays its bills. So fun, cool. Do we need a $5 billion meme generator? Probably not. Does Facebook need it so they can continue to sell advertising? Absolutely. There's no question. Our attention span is getting down to the point of, wait, what was the question?
Well, and four
what were we talking about?
4 billion users, right? So it's easy to say, hey, as I just said, right? We don't need another platform, another AI assistant, but it's almost like, as I've advised organizations over the years, it's not always the best. I'm not saying it's not the best product, but it's not always the best product out there that wins. It's the one that gets out there, right? Communicates, markets well, whatever. They've already got the user base, 4 billion across Facebook and Instagram. So that may be enough to make it a very quick front runner.
Well, and of those 4 billion, potentially up to what, 500 million of them are actual carbon-based humans. I mean,
we're going to get
probably agents anyway.
We're going to get to that. You're getting ahead of us.
You're welcome for the segue.
Department of Justice wants to break up Google's advertising empire. They're ruling that it's operating an illegal ad tech monopoly. It may force them to sell its ad exchange and management platform. There's also talks about having to sell Google Chrome. So I don't know. I feel like that's far fetched, but the court is arguing that they illegally monopolized 3 separate markets in the ad tech space. And they're going after them as well right now for search. So we probably won't know until the fall how that's going to shape up, at least the fall. But interesting times.
So you're saying to me, like, the world's one of the 5 most valuable companies in human history that doesn't actually produce anything other than search results might be breaking the law and formed a monopoly? Beauregard, catch me my fainting couch. Come on. I mean, realistically, Fang is worth $1 gajillion because this is how they operated. I mean, this shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. If it's a surprise to anyone, it's that the DOJ is stepping up to actually, enforce this to a certain extent. And obviously I'm being a bit flip, but it's the nature of an organization like this. Basically, their motto used to be "Do no evil." And if someone needs to have a motto that says "Do no evil," what are they most likely doing? They're probably evil, right? They're so bad that they actually drop that from their motto. So that, I mean, at that point, all bets are off. So kudos to the DOJ for trying. Can they execute and pull it off? Likely not. Is it going to cause another $1 billion worth of litigation? Most likely. So, good to be a lawyer on the team there. Will they actually do a breakup? Highly unlikely. They might do one as a punitive, don't do this again. So they maybe split off Chrome or something and let OpenAI. Sam was saying he'd buy it last week or something. I can see them doing something that sounds like it's a big deal, but operationally and functionally it's not. But we check a box. We slapped your hand a little. And this is exactly what happened to Microsoft ages ago, right? What did they force them to split off? Something or other. It's regulatory theater, I would call it, and it's entertaining. So
Yeah, but it also has an effect on how things will go in the tech space for the next couple of years, right? And I don't know. I completely agree. I mean, at least based on the traditional definition. I've said this before on the show. The traditional definition of a monopoly. I don't know that it qualifies. That's probably a show in itself. But I get the sentiment, right? If they own the publisher network and the ad network, then then they're monopolizing things. But whether or not the experience, one of the accusations is that that they have been able to create not only profits at the expense of publishers and advertisers, but have created a worsening experience. And I don't know that every advertiser and publisher would say that. I think that as somebody who's advertised on Google Ads, having access across multiple channels from a single platform, has its benefits as well. Versus having to learn, multiple platforms and things like that as a marketer. So I don't know. My bigger issue with it is the timing of it. Like, they made these acquisitions, and actually one of them was the DoubleClick acquisition that, according to the initial, the judge on the initial lawsuit is saying is not, up for debate. At one point they were saying that was should have been an illegal acquisition, but they approved it when it happened, right? So things like that, kind of retroactively. I guess that's your point around the theater, right? Retroactively going back after a company's invested, billions of dollars into innovations, and then retroactively going back and saying, yeah, we said yes then, but now it's not okay. That concerns me a little bit.
Well, and you make an extremely valid point. Monopolies actually do produce better outcomes up to the point that they don't, or I should say, the benefit of centralization, as you mentioned, is a positive until the cost associated with not having choice overcomes the benefit, and so we're probably well past the cusp of that to a certain extent. So in some ways that's really bad, but in some ways it opens up more and more doors for actual competition. And what comes to mind along these lines is YouTube, right? They bought YouTube. Nobody understood back in the day, how in the world are you going to make money off of this model? Now they make unbelievable money, and they have unbelievable power and control over content consumption. But as a result, the more that monopoly power switches from being a benefit to consumers to being more of a negative, then you get rumbles, and you get these other platforms that start popping up to provide the alternatives, and that kind of forced competition against the monopoly. If they survive, then they're likely to be even more useful and better to consumers. So it's a constant battle and warfare. To me, the fact that they have that power and it's potentially being questioned at least might slow down some of the nastier aspects of what they're doing. But to me, I prefer to see alternative platforms kind of going after the monopolies. Because let's face it, I mean, how innovative is Google anymore? Whatever happened to Google Glass? We were supposed to, that was actually pretty cool back in the day, and now it seems like it's so ancient times, right?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you one of the things that came out of that antitrust trial that is very concerning to me was a kind of a revelation from the VP of DeepMind, who was testifying on how they use data. So under the category of kind of data control and transparency. And I know this is a gong that you beat a lot, but basically what he said was that even when publishers have opted out of the AI training because of their search capabilities, they can still train DeepMind on or AI assets within Google on web content because I guess of the way the wording is that they're opting out of DeepMind's AI lab, but not necessarily out of other Google AI. So now you're talking about that monopoly theoretically, and also vague opt-in policies, or maybe purposely deceptive opt-out policies being used across different parts of the business or different businesses within the enterprise. And that's where I think you start having a case for this is becoming not only a governance and regulatory issue, but a monopoly, a negative not monopoly effect.
As you say, I've been banging this gong for well over a decade. It makes me think of the skit "More Cowbell," right? We need more gong because people still aren't listening. But yeah, I mean, opting out of anything on any of these platforms related to privacy is the same thing as saying I'm going to use Telegram for my messaging because I want it to be secure. It's not secure. All of the stuff's being monitored. You go to Telegram, all you're doing is raising your hand saying, follow me because I'm trying to do something that I don't want you to know about. Yeah. Right. So the opt out doesn't opt you out of anything. It just makes you more interesting because you thought to click the button of opting out. It's actually a different layer of personalized data that they sell to advertisers and whoever's buying the data. It is what it is. I mean, and if you spend any amount of time going through the end user license agreement that you've agreed to 1,000 times and never once read, it'll blow your mind. I've done that as a workshop for untold number of attorneys and judges, and they're just dumbfounded at what people are agreeing to. So of course, if you opt out, they're still collecting it. They have workarounds. They always have. And again, you're just saying, I'm more interesting to follow, so follow me. Will regulators ever do anything about it? No, because when I do my privacy workshops on privacy regulation, any privacy regulation that I've ever viewed around the globe is like all these harsh penalties apply or whatever, unless the user gives consent. And that caveat is in every single privacy regulation ever written anywhere since the beginning of time, most likely. And what's the very first thing you do when you click the button when you download the app? You give your consent. Ergo, it's a circular argument, and you're being followed anyway. So,
last story before we get to our main topic, Chris. I have to mention this. This whole thing with the air traffic control system at Newark Airport. For anybody who ever flies into the U.S. Or flies within the U.S., you've probably gone through Newark at some point. It's a major hub in the New York metro area. It's in New Jersey, but it's a major hub in the metro New York area. According to, and they've been having all these delays related to air traffic control over the last couple weeks, to the extent where there's been accusations from some of the airlines that air traffic controllers walked out of the job. There's been others who have claimed that that there's system outages and all this stuff. But according to Bloomberg, they've got sources saying that the air traffic controllers at Newark Liberty on April 28th lost all radar and radio communication for a minute and a half. And that's really the reasoning behind all of the issues and delays over the last week or so, I guess. And that one of the sources said that there's no backup for that system when they failed. All they can do is wait for those systems to come back online, which, we've all dealt with that kind of scenario, but we're not, we don't have like planes in the sky that we can pause if the systems go down. Right. So I feel like we've talked about this before, but Chris, explain this. I know it's more complicated than it seems, but like, how is that even possible that something this, business critical, not business critical, human life critical, cannot have the redundancy that a regular like data server should have in a social media website?
We just need Vibe ATC, right? We'll just give it to ChatGPT and we'll like vibe our way through landings and takeoffs. When I was earning my pilot's license years ago, I was actually flying in New York City airspace. It was absolutely terrifying because you're in this little Cessna going around and trying to land in between 747s. It was absolutely mind-boggling. The question of how, single point of failure, how in the world can we operate this way? When I started building spacecraft, that was kind of what I was focused on, is reliability, resilience, failure tolerance, all that kind of stuff. So it's near and dear to me. And almost nobody designs for this anymore. Because it's viewed as not as cool, not as sexy, not as relevant. If it blows up, I'm just going to pull a Homer Simpson and like back up into the bushes and pretend I didn't see anything. But it reminds me of a story of a company in the life sciences I was working with. And they had an ERP system that controlled all of their supply of the products that they delivered. And what they were doing, they were blood fractionators. So you go in, you donate blood, and they would separate all the things out, platelets and proteins and so forth. And their patients were all hemophiliacs who the stuff they extracted from other people's blood went into them, and that's what kept them from bleeding to death over a pinprick. So, I mean, it was like a couple 100,000 people on the face of the planet that were desperately dependent upon this company's products. And they were looking to build a backup system for their inventory control for all of this stuff. Now, FDA requires full life cycle chain of custody control from vein to vein, they used to say, right? So you take it out of this person, you got to keep track of every single thing that you collected until it ends up in patient at the other end. And it takes a year to go from vein to vein in that business, right? So from the point of collection to the point I'm actually giving it to someone as treatment takes a year. So they have a year's supply of inventory on hand all the time. They did not have a backup of any kind for their ERP system. None. It was a single instance in a cloud server somewhere. And when they asked us to help them come up with a plan, I was horrified. I'm like, all right, so you need at least a hot backup, let alone a cold standby. This is crazy. And we gave them a price tag. I think it was like a couple $1,000,000, whatever the actual figure was. And at the end, they decided not to do it because and it was like over $1 billion of material in inventory that would be affected. It was cheaper for them to buy $1 billion worth of insurance coverage if they just lost all the product than it was to implement the hot backup of the ERP system. So that's what they did. They went with a cheaper alternative. Didn't matter if it shut down and all their customers would be dead within a couple of weeks. Didn't look good in the Excel spreadsheet that finance put together, so they didn't do that. So I'm not the least bit surprised that this happens a lot more often than I think people realize. And when I talk about error accumulation in AI and like that little rounding error of every decision AI makes will always eventually lead to a 3 Mile Island or a Chernobyl, there you go. It's just waiting to happen. Just hope you're not airborne at the time around Newark.
Well, I guess I was stupid for thinking you were going to give me the warm and fuzzy. It's not as bad as you think, Dan, thing. So I guess I'm going to cancel my next flight.
It's not as bad as you think because the likelihood of you being airborne at the time it happens, flying around Newark, is
we're just doing the statistic odds thing. Okay,
it's also it's like getting bitten by a great white shark in a tornado after winning the Powerball. The likelihood is small enough that hopefully you don't have to worry about it.
All right, so don't trust the system, just trust the odds, I think is what you're telling me.
The problem is that statistics don't apply when the sample size is 1, right? You don't kind of die in a plane crash. You either do or you don't. So that's the thing that keeps you up at night is when the sample size is 1 and it's you.
Craziness. All right, our main topic today is foreign adversaries. So there's this crazy article in Wired magazine last week about this scheme. It's essentially a scheme, and it follows a couple IT hiring recruiters and hiring employees who are hiring various different IT roles, mostly programmers. And after a bunch of time, started seeing some weird things and essentially figured out that the people that were applying for these remote tech jobs, these remote programming jobs, were fake, were not real people. So there's been this investigation. They found U.S. authorities have started putting this together. And at least in this one example, there's all of these very fairly sophisticated people in North Korea or that are employed in other locations by North Korea to get these U.S. jobs. And there's kind of one of two goals seemingly. One is to funnel money back to North Korea or Russia. But I think in this story, they were talking mostly about North Korea, to funnel money back to North Korea, which has become supposedly a kind of computer science, mecca in its own way, right? The Kim Jong-un, was a gamer and kind of a techie guy. So apparently he's instituted some pretty strong computer science in schools there, and it's a pretty good job because you get paid more than the average North Korean, and you get more access, more unfiltered, uncensored internet access than the average citizen. But there's even situations where they've taken people put them in other countries, 20 people living in a house in another country using things like VPNs and things to access U.S. networks. And like I said, funnel money back to North Korea, but also steal data, right? It doesn't take a whole lot of time, as you know, Chris, right? Of being into somebody's system to steal data or even plant future viruses, hijacks, malicious code that could be used later on. And so there's so many different sides of the story. Obviously, there's a security side, there's a political side, there's the globalization side. But the one that kind of got my attention is, how do you avoid this if you're the person trying to hire? So lots here, but what are your thoughts?
So many ways you can take this. So, I mean, to your point about hack, I mean, how many of these HR, what do you do if you apply to a job? Attach your resume here, right? Well, I attach that there. And then if the HR manager likes you, what do? They start sending it around by email or whatever throughout the organization. Awesome attack vector for any kind of viruses or whatever. And invariably, whatever you attach, someone somewhere is going to open it up, and who knows what payloads are along for the ride. So again, a very good attack vector, and even more so now that people are using AI. I'm largely convinced that probably 90% of the resumes or the job applications that anyone's getting these days are all fake. It's all penetrative. It's all performative. And it was about 3 years ago, a colleague, and clearly this got much worse after COVID because everybody was working from home.
Yeah.
But a colleague actually hired a person that was remote worker, supposedly in the US. And they noticed that after they hired this, and like impeccable IT credentials, right? An absolute unicorn. And so part of the challenge that I think a lot of organizations have is they have this, they approach recruiting like they approach dating. I want the absolute perfect person, like, Disney prince, blah, or princess, whatever, must be absolutely ideal. And otherwise I'm just going to hold out until I get the absolute best. And they better only need $25,000 a year on top of that. And nobody stops to think when you get precisely the match that you're looking for at some ridiculously low price, there's no skepticism. You're just, oh my gosh, I found exactly what I wanted. And so it reminds me of the Tinder swindler a few years ago, the guy that got arrested because he conned all these women out of a bunch of money because, he put out the dating profile. He's 6'3". He's a Mossad agent who's also a diamond dealer and flies around in his Gulfstream and so forth. And it was kind of like a honeypot. So I think there's a lot of that going on in this world. But the person that they hired, they were doing good work, but they noticed after like 3 months, they were always working these really strange hours, right? They were getting the work done, but they were working at night. And upon investigation, they found out it was a total fake person that was out in this case, India, and was getting these $100,000 coding jobs in the US and then outsourcing it to someone else in India for like $10,000 and pocketing the difference. And that person had like 6 jobs all at the same time in the US.
Yeah.
Now take me to North Korea. And as you said, Kim Jong-un loves games. I wrote about this a decade ago. We used to call it gold digging, where North Korea had thousands of people who had game accounts. And if you were playing Minecraft or whatever game, and you wanted to advance up the levels and you didn't want to play the game yourself, you would outsource it to a North Korean who would play the game for you. And then you'd pay them. This is how they would get hard currency with all of the what am I trying to they don't allow North Korea to have access to hard currency. So they were doing this to get hard currency.
Yeah.
They had thousands of people playing games. It was outsourcing your gameplay to get advancement.
Yeah.
So I'm not the least bit surprised. And I would fully expect the scale is going to be even higher. And again, the ability to penetrate systems with attach your resume here in .doc or PDF, it's a phenomenal attack vector.
Well, and it's from a different perspective, right? It's a little bit easier, not easy, but it's a little bit simpler if somebody spoofs an email or something and tries to get you to transfer money into their account, or you get one of those, I'm in trouble, I'm stuck in this country, can you wire money scams, right? But this is a lot more elaborate, and AI tools have helped fueled it, right? So they have the ability to use AI to apply for jobs, take coding tests that are given to by the hiring managers. There's even stories of people being interviewed on camera, who, by the way, in hindsight, didn't really look like the picture, and had a different accent than the person expected. But hiring, right? You can't ask people like certain questions, and there's certain things you can't ask, which I think is going to have to change, because of this. And then, with them making excuses for why all of a sudden there's another participant in the Google Meet, or all of a sudden their connection, they say their connection's bad and they disconnect and come back because the chat GPT or AI prompt that they're using to answer the questions went down during the middle of the interview, or they say something that basically we would know as a AI hallucination to a hiring manager. And sometimes hiring managers are not technical people, right? And so at least the first couple rounds of interviews, they're under pressure to hire people. They pass the test, they look like a real person, and so that's enough to pass the litmus test if you're hiring a boatload of people. And like you said, at best, they're just, you're overpaying for work that's being subbed out. But at worst, they're stealing company secrets in the process. And what makes it even more complicated is they're getting very good, apparently, according to this article in Wired, they're getting very much better at ID verification. They're stealing IDs and using those IDs to apply as U.S. Citizens, and they've been able to recruit American citizens to run what they call these kind of laptop farms. There's one of the ones that I mentioned in the story is a woman who was originally contacted, started with a couple accounts. They paid her like 30% of the salaries, and her job was to handle all of the company computers for fake North Korean employees, do paperwork, sign federal documents that prove that they were U.S. citizens, helped with money transfers. So they have somebody on the ground, and then they've got all these people overseas. And when authorities kind of figured it out, they figured out that this one person had helped facilitate $17 million and enabled over 300 companies, including large Fortune 100 tech companies and defense contractors, to inadvertently hire North Korean imposters.
Yeah, for 25, well, almost 30 years, we were doing offshoring. Now I would call this unshoring or deshoring, right? And kudos to them. Maybe the work gets done, maybe it doesn't. We're in our relentless drive to cut costs. This is the next step along the way. Probably going to not have some bad side effects. But embargo, that was the word I was looking for before. Sanctions against North Korea. I don't know that this takes me back to having the hot standby for your ERP system. I don't know that anybody is willing to make the investment to try to prevent against this, particularly since arguably these people probably are more cost efficient and more cost effective. But at some point, we need to come to the realization that you don't get something for nothing. And when a deal sounds too good to be true, it's too good to be true. And the ability to kind of sniff this sort of thing out is going to become more and more relevant. As you know, I've been writing about for over a decade that the more we automate, the more we're going to value the human. And so to me, this is another example of that. The ability to actually sit on a camera across from someone, because we can't do it in person, and suss out, is this a fake or is this real, is going to become even more important as we try to make that distinction. It's going to be more and more important to have actual human capabilities around all of our automation and overseeing it.
Yeah. So one of the security experts that was interviewed in this article, listed out a couple things, that you can do, but it seems like the biggest one is, monitoring what's happening on those laptops. Cause as you pointed out, I kind of jumped over this fact, but the remote working thing is what really enabled this. I mean, it was just happening before COVID, to some level, but the scale, has, ratcheted up since COVID.
Orders of magnitude worse.
Yeah, right. The remote worker thing, especially with developers, I feel like that's one of the areas where people have been very, because it's more quantifiable. Like you can kind of quantify what someone's done in a day's work. So it's one of the areas that I think has stayed fairly remote, and you may want certain skill sets that you can't get locally. So I feel like it's one of the jobs that, I have to look at the numbers on this, but one of the jobs that probably still has a very high remote worker rate. And then to your point, right? There's always been a propensity to outsource these things. Although this particular one was all US based employees supposedly, but you're right. I mean, if I'm hiring somebody, I think they're in whatever, Spain, and maybe they're actually in India or North Korea, and I'm trying to get the cost savings thing. That's something to be wary of. And they found out most of these were found out based on, well, the government found these weird changes of addresses and fake people they were sending checks to, and so they found this woman who was the facilitator, which broke open the case. But the companies that were doing this, most of them only found out because at some point they installed something on the laptop that flagged some kind of IT, monitoring or access controls. And then when they look into it, they realize they've got all this remote access software installed on the computer, and they were able to trace it back.
Well, or someone's super productive as a developer and no one stopped to think, okay, let's search and see if this code is original, or they just copy pasted out of GitHub, which is probably 90% of the so-called code that your developer is developing for you. It sort of goes back to the too good to be true. I mean, when you get the resume and the person's going to take $25,000 a year in San Francisco, and they claim to be the inventor of OpenAI in 1997, and they're only 24 years old, you might want to show some skepticism, right? Yeah. Maybe it is too good to be true. So part of it is a little bit of recognizing the honeypotting that's going on with that. Because the other challenge is these fake employees need to somehow rise above actual human beings and get on your radar from your applicant tracking system. So, and this is a signal to noise problem. If someone looks so good as a candidate for what you want, and they're like an order of magnitude below market rate, maybe you should just not give them a call, right? Because it's too good to be true.
Well, there's little human things that I think, still, as good as AI gets it, and maybe it gets there, there's certain things, call it the gut feel thing, where if I speak to you, even over a camera like this, and I just sense something is off, right? Like we can't do that quite yet with AI. Actually, you remind me, the story that this article started with was the guy, the hiring manager. Everything went good. Like you look at a checklist, to your point, everything looked perfect, looked like a dream candidate, all that stuff. But something bothered him. And when he went back, he realized what bothered him was that the candidate didn't care anything about the health insurance. Stupid little thing like that. And, maybe that's not a big deal to some people, but he said that's usually one of the company pension plan and the health insurance plan are what sell companies to employees, right? It's not always just the salary. And he looked back at his notes. He goes, this person only wanted to know what the salary was and what the pay schedule was, and didn't care about any of the other kind of fringe benefits that like a normal person would care about. And he found that odd, and that's what kind of led them to figure this one case out. But yeah, like there's still a gut feel thing, right?
Researchers it's called the uncanny valley, right? The more a simulation of human behavior gets closer and closer to actual human behavior, the more off-putting it is. And to your point, that gut feel, you gotta trust it a little bit, because it's again part of what makes us human, and it's probably the part that we're never going to be able to replicate in code, or if we do, it'll be too late, and we'll all be plugged into the matrix anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, be skeptical. being that ideal for what you're looking for doesn't make rational sense, right? It just doesn't. And so you, again, a degree of skepticism. If something's, again, back to the movie Blade Runner, you know, the fake humans were more human than human. If someone seems like a superhuman optimal match for you, then you gotta say something's wrong here.
Yeah, that's the too good to be true thing. And yeah, just, robust security controls, enforcement controls, verification. But even that's hard. Like there was this one example where, they got smart and they said, but before a call, they had to hold up their badge, on the camera. So these guys developed basically a green screen card that they would hold up and be able to do a deep fake. It was a deep fake thing, and even replicate that because you're talking about each of these teams, which is like a dozen people in North Korea or one of the satellite sites. They're raking in like a $3 million a team, which kind of flies under the radar until you start adding it up and say, well, there's whatever it is. I don't know how many there are, but there's 20 of these teams, there's 50 of these teams, there's 100 of these teams, all making a few $1 million, right?
Like we always said in the cybersecurity business, the bad guys only have to be right once. The good guys have to be right all the time.
Yeah.
And then it's just a numbers game. And thanks to all this automation and AI, they can make billions of attempts. And if they're right a 100% of the time, they're multimillionaires. It's great business.
And by the way, what's the risk, right? They're in North. I mean, there's a whole other thing about them.
Yeah, what are you gonna do to me? Like make me poor and take away my food?
but like for the average person outside of the U.S., like there's really little downside. The facilitator, who is the American citizen, that person's going to jail, right? But the rest of them, they just, I got fired. Okay, next, right?
Yeah, welcome to globalization. It's very, very good lessons to learn, but embrace your humanness and that uncanny valley. And as you said, your gut feel that something isn't right here. That's the last crutch we're going to have for hanging on to actual reality.
Being human is still a differentiator for now. I like it.
Our mistakes and shortcomings are what make us more perfect. Our imperfections.
Well, thanks for joining us, everybody. We're back Wednesday at noon Eastern, 9 Pacific. In the meantime, if there's anything that you're working on and you need some help with, please reach out to us, irpaai.com/analysts. And if you're on the sell side and you're looking to promote your offerings or become an approved vendor, you can go to irpaai.com/provider subscriptions. Have a great week, everybody. Chris, thank you so much.
Goodbye from Pyongyang.